The S&P 500 and the Nasdaq 100 today. The biggest subject was CPI coming in hotter than expected. Our first rise since July. We've been on the decline once again. Obviously, a little bit of a surprise. Now, the Fed had a lot to say about this. The Fed had a few comments to make, and it seems like they're kind of trying to shove it underneath the rug. So the question now is, can we continue? Can we continue to make higher highs and higher lows and push back into local highs? That's the main question here. We have equities trying to make all-time highs like Nvidia, Microsoft. We have other names such as Tesla pushing down into lows. So again, it's a little bit of a confusing area. We're going to tackle exactly how we're trading and what we're buying at these levels to maintain our risk. Let's get to work. First thing that we're going to do is talk about the Nasdaq. And when I go over the Nasdaq, let's go to the 15 minutes so you can see what happened like kind of intraday here. So basically you come out at, market open. This is about an hour before market open. You're dropping from CPI news. You bounce at our 16.9 level, come back into that 17K resistance. This was the really big resistance we talked about yesterday where we ended up kind of closing at. And then you rejected once again, pushing down into lows. You broke below 16.8 momentarily and then bounced from that range. Now, again, if you are not following on Twitter, I recommend doing so you can see all these updates in real time. Again, I post a lot of these throughout the day so you are prepared and you are ready. Just so you know, 16.8, that's a big level. Under 16.8, shorts should print on Tesla. Tesla ended up, we'll talk about that here in a second as well. But you remount and you push back up locally to 16.95. All things considered, when we look at the daily, very impressive. Very impressive looking at this type of information, okay? And I'm going to go a little bit more into why and what's happening here. But again, the fact that shorts weren't able to hold you below 16.8 was huge. And it didn't just happen quick. You had multiple opportunities where buyers were not stepping in, and then buyers ended up stepping in because shorts would not push you back down towards 16.6. Okay, you go into something like SPY, and a lot of people, beginning of the day, a lot of people like to call out, setups. And first 2 hours of trading, you were probably like engulfing, bearish engulfing candle on the daily. Not the case, right? You ended up pretty decent hold up here. Again, above most of your key levels, right? You go to the 15 minute, you see this morning we came back below our, 473.5. This is that big line in the sand. If you get below this, you're pretty bearish, right? And then you mount back above 476. When you look at this on an hour, the 30 minute, 15 minute, it's hard not to argue the case for a potential bull flag. It's hard not to, okay? So again, you held a lot of these big key levels. IWM. Now, this is the one that I think needs the most love. IWM is definitely the bearish of all indexes, the Russell. But again, you're still, grinding on that lower high trend right here. You're trying to break out desperately. So again, IWM, a little bit of love here, and you can start breaking back up. Again, IWM, I'm not looking to go long on anything small, mid-cap until you're back above 200. That's my opinion there. And then we go into the dollar. The dollar, this morning, a lot of upside into market open, right? And then really nothing but downside after that. The yields, you're holding up pretty decent. You ended up dropping near the end of the day. So this was the interesting point of view here. This was the interesting part that we had to pay close attention to, okay? Now, moving from this, again, opportunity starts to open up. Because when we go to equities, you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so when you're looking at exactly what's taking place here, very surprising. We're going to look at the CPI numbers here in a second, but very surprising that CPI came out hotter than expected and buyers were able to hold you up. In my opinion, I think you needed a good CPI to validate a top on DXY and yields. The market is still pushing this overall agenda of a soft landing and still being on track. And that's what the Fed was saying today. You can check out our Twitter to see the retweets and what Fed, I think it was Barkin that was talking today. But again, they're still saying on the same track. Now, I will say, it's still ridiculous people that are anticipating a cut by March or anything like that. The soonest you'd get a cut, in my opinion, is going to be in the summer. And it's not going to be because you hit that 2% inflation goal. That's not going to happen this year. I believe one of the Fed members came out into that today as well. But it's important to realize where we're at and having realistic expectations. And I still believe the market is pushing a lot of these realistic expectations based on how we see some of these equities moving. And the equities are sometimes the biggest thing. They give you the best viewpoint. Now, today's interesting because we're going to go over a few names, right? And just off the top of my head, Tesla and Boeing, very bearish names I'm looking at for downside. But then you have names like Nvidia and Microsoft, that are leading the market into highs. AVGO bouncing back into highs, right? So there's a little bit of unbalanced behavior on the market. And this is probably some of the more difficult times to trade. And I want to highlight that before we go back into the charts, just so you understand. Okay, so again, I want to say this really quick. Whenever you have equities moving like this, you got to be careful. Like, right, Tesla, right? Tesla has been just tracking to the downside. You broke the 200 SMA today, 226 now, right? Very weak. And then you go to, Nasdaq, and, Nasdaq's recovered very well. It's been moving pretty strong over the past few days, and Tesla's just not connected. Apple trying to get it back to the upside. So you have to be able to navigate which are the strong names and what are the weak names. So if I'm going long in this market, I'm not trying to go long at something like Tesla. I'm trying to go long at something like Nvidia, something like Microsoft, right? The strongest names out there right now. I can only say this so many times, so make sure that's really clear. So these names are still holding up well. So let's go over equities really quick, and then hopefully we'll go over a few more things before I let you out of here. Now, number one, Microsoft. What I'm looking at here is your all-time high, your previous all-time high on November 29th, okay? It's basically 384.3. You would like to see that level mount and hold. So far, if we look at the daily, you held it. Just saying. So if we come into tomorrow above this level, I like Microsoft a lot. Above 384.3, you're looking for upside. So you got the break, looking for push back to the upside. Again, that's what I like there. Nvidia, if it gets back below that level, I'm not interested in trading. Nvidia, pretty interesting. We go to the 2-hour chart. Now, Nvidia has been doing something very similar. Let's go to the 15-minute, okay? Give you a better visual. So what Nvidia is doing is making little tops, right? Where you top out, you break up, you mount, you break up, you mount, you break up, you kind of mounting here. You get a little bit of a fake breakdown here with that sell-off this morning, and you bounce back up very strong. And we're kind of just consolidating at highs now. Now, again, I'm not saying to go long on Nvidia. It's like Nvidia for me now, I'm done. I'm staying away from Nvidia. It's just too high for me. However, when you have Nvidia move like this, we know it can lead the market. We know it can carry most semiconductors, and we know semiconductors will lag behind and eventually follow. So when you go over something like AVGO, it's not surprising the behavior that you're getting here. You're now mounting that 1062 level. You're moving with strength, and you're pushing back and filling that gap that we mentioned right there at 1110. Right? So again, not a surprise with how some of these names are moving. Okay? Go over to Google. Again, Google, that bump and run, we're still breaking up, still sitting at highs. So even though you have this behavior from indexes that really shot you down like almost 250 points on NQ, we could all agree that these equities don't look that bad, right? You had some sell-offs on like Meta, but you're bouncing right back. Okay? And those are things that we have to be paying attention to. Now, the biggest shocker, in my opinion, was how the dollar and yields have reacted from this and how we've kind of reacted as a whole. But I still can't ignore how strong this, correction has been back to the upside, right? Again, Adobe bouncing back on those key levels, right? Previous box we were trading in, previous highs here, mounting, pushing back up. So as a whole, I believe the market's still very strong. Amazon trying to get back above 156.5, okay? All these names, I just want to go over a lot of them and just giving you a really good perspective of the upside opportunity. And I'm not going over this just to harp on the market being so incredibly bullish. I just want to highlight the resilience that a lot of these equities showed despite the market pulling back. Now, again, going into tomorrow, the levels remain the same. If Nasdaq breaks below 16.8, I am bearish. I am looking for downside opportunity. As long as we hold that level, I remain pretty strong. As long as we're above 16.9 and specifically, you have to be even stronger, okay? So I want to go over a few names that I am looking for still for downside opportunity, and those names are Tesla and Boeing, to be very clear. So number one, Tesla, and I'm going to tell you right now, Tesla is not my favorite. It isn't. But Tesla is very weak as it is. So Tesla here on the 5-minute, you basically see how it traded all day. This little level here at basically 226.4. You kind of sat there this morning, descending triangle, broke down, broke back above, sat there, and now you're breaking down the after hours. Tesla's extremely, extremely weak. You have your 200 SMA on the weekly around 215. My target is going to be around the 218 level, 218 to 217 down here. I'd be looking for that as a major level or inflection point. Again, it probably hits pretty quick if selling occurs tomorrow. Next up, Boeing. I love this name. I love it to the downside here. I think if you're going long with something like Microsoft or Nvidia, whatever you're doing, I think Boeing is probably the best hedge for your money. Okay, let me explain why. Okay, so Boeing here on the 15-minute. Now, a few things. We know all the bad news coming out about them, right? We already know that. The second thing we already know is that you're in a clear descending triangle, as you can see here. Very weak. Obviously, lower highs, clear flat bottom, you're breaking down, you look good. Now, even more so, we go to the 4 hour, or actually let's go to the daily, okay? Now, the daily, you're getting back in this giant box in which you traded in for a long time, right? You basically traded in a box like this for a while, from basically, 222 down into lows of 194. You're getting back in that range. On top of that, the same way we looked at Tesla for pushing back into the 200 SMA on the daily, right there. That's my target. I'm not even gonna lie to you. I'm going to be probably trying to take profits at 217, 216, but I think you could go down to 214, 215. One of my favorite names, they just announced the investigation going on to what's happening with their planes. I think more downside is highly, highly likely as well. February 16th contracts make the most sense for me personally. You have earnings coming up as well, so you'll be protected with IV. Across the board, favorite setup, love Boeing to the downside. I want to be super clear though, again, I think right now you got to be very protective with your money, very passive right now. Again, I like the setup of Boeing. I like the downside. It's probably like one of my favorite setups right now. But I also love Microsoft. I love how we're performing. I love how we're mounting previous all-time highs. These are very strong behaviors that we've seen. We saw what we made with NVIDIA. We saw how that printed so well. Again, I've already made a good sizable chunk of change off of Microsoft. So right now I'm kind of double dipping. But again, you have to be able to understand your risk tolerance when it comes to these trades and where you're at. Even though today was a bit of a headwind, I was pretty passive. I didn't do too much at all today. I was like, man, this is crazy how we're reacting here. And I have to acknowledge whenever I'm surprised by a reaction, that it's probably best if I just take a step back and watch what's happening, okay? So again, you're going to have those days too, even where I'm surprised, right? And I do this every single day, all day, every day. It's all I do is watch stocks and charts and talk about the stock market, right? I'm live for 2-3 hours a day. Right? So again, even I come into the market sometimes and I get taken back by it. But again, I think if you're patient here, you watch how the PA plays out. We have PPI in the morning as well, which could help the market if it comes out better, which typically PPI is better than CPI. Again, I would take a few, foot off the brakes, be a little bit passive here, let the trades come to you, watch the key levels, the newsletter, Twitter, everything like that. We'll have you prepared. I'll see you guys tomorrow.